Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtapraishu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Today we're starting one of my favorite chapters in Srimad Bhagavatam. And also now we're entering a section in the first canto that's I find extremely interesting. There's so many wonderful and very instructive conversations coming up in the next few chapters. And this chapter in particular has so much happening in it. But it starts off kind of where all of you have left off with this conversation of Narad Muni and Vyasadeva. We're going to do texts 1 through 6 today, though I kind of wanted to go like, I don't know how you usually do it. Do you read up, everyone says the verse, and then you go up to the verse that is the verse of the day, or you do it however? Okay, anyway, we'll do it verse at a time, and I have a few comments into verse 6, which is our verse for the day. So I'll just start off. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Dinamini Namaste. Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bhajayani Nivasesha Shridhari. Astitade Shitani. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhupada Shri Radha Shiva Sati Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. We get to the first verse. I guess we can just do translation up to text 6. So text 1. Someone want to read it?
Rishi Shanaka said, O Sutta, the great and transcendently powerful Vyasadeva heard everything from Sri Narada Muni. So after Narada's departure, what did Vyasadeva do?
So when Narada Muni had recently just left and had this conversation and shared his story with Vyasadeva, giving him the instruction to what to do in order to his sort of rectify his situation. He was feeling like sort of despondent. He hasn't quite, even though he's compiled the Vedas and the Mahabharata, he still feels like there was a missing piece. And I was hearing Gurujan Prabhu speak on these set of verses, and he made a statement. He said that, and one could say that these next 7 verses are perhaps the most important in the Bhagavatam, and it really caught me. I said, well, there's so many important segments in the Bhagavatam. What's so striking about this? But this is the section of Srimad Bhagavatam that if this didn't happen, if this pastime we're about to hear about, these next few verses didn't happen, it wouldn't be Srimad Bhagavatam. This is what Srila Vyasadeva did, his intention, his mood, in meditating on the Supreme Lord that allowed him to have the understanding to why he needs to compile Srimad Bhagavatam and what Srimad Bhagavatam needs to be about. So I think that's the second verse.
Srila said, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related with the Vedas, there is a cottage for meditation at Samya Prasa, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages.
So here, there's, I don't know if anyone here has been to Bajrashram in India. I went when I was very young, and there's a cave called Vyaskufa. This is a cave, Gufami's cave. This is the cave where Vyasadeva sat, and he was in meditation, and this Leela is where he sat and he compiled Mahabharata and so many things. And if you go in, it's just this tiny, like literally a tiny little cave, and there's a deity of Vyasadeva there, and the deity is here, and the ceiling is right there. And you think, wow, this is the spot. This is where Vyasadeva sat. And so this is where he went on the western bank of the Saraswati. Third verse.
In the place, Srila Vyasadeva, in his own ashrama, which was surrounded by berry trees, sat down to meditate after touching water for purification.
That's number 4.
Thus he fixed his mind, perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, bhakti yoga, without any tinge of materialism. And thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead, along with his external energy, which was under full control.
So up to this point, he had compiled the Vedas, the Mahabharata. He's written about Dharma. He's written about Brahman realization, so many rules and regulations and Vedic injunctions, but he was still dissatisfied. And so this was his impetus, and this was his instruction and inspiration from Narada Muni, who everything Narada Muni has done or has accomplished has come through Bhakti Yoga. So it's very important to note here, the verses Bhakti Yoga Manasi. Manasi, he meditated with full Bhakti Yoga, perfectly linking his devotional service without any tinge of materialism. It says in earlier in the Bhagavatam that devotional service is unmotivated and uninterrupted. And so without any personal motivation, he connected with Krishna and Bhakti Yoga. And what did he see? He had darshan of the absolute personality of Godhead, which is so important, especially in the context of Vyasadeva, because Vyasadeva had compiled Vedic literature, which didn't speak about the personality of Godhead, which spoke about the impersonal energies of Godhead. And therefore, he saw the absolute personality of Godhead, and he saw its external energy. It's two separate things. And he saw his external energy, the Maya potency of the personality of Godhead, was fully under his control. And so this is such a breakthrough revelation for Vyasadeva, because so far he has compiled Vedic literature that has so much to do with the absolute energy as being, the external energy as being absolute. But now he's finally saying, oh, they're separate. One is under the control of the Supreme Person. Of the Supreme Person, Krishna is controlling this external energy. So this is the first part of the vision that he sees. Next 5.
Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries.
So after he sees the three potencies of, there's external potency, internal potency, and marginal potency. So he sees in his vision altogether Krishna and all of his potencies, but here he's seeing now the jiva. Okay, so he sees, due to this external energy which Krishna is fully under control of, there's also the living entity. And the living entity is under the control of this external energy, and they're completely engrossed in it. And even though by nature, right, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, is naturally transcendental to the external energy. What happens is that, and this is what we learn about the Gita, that the living entity thinks himself as a material product, identifies himself or herself with matter, not spirit, not as a part and parcel of Krishna, and therefore undergoes the reactions of material miseries. And the reactions of the external energy is ultimately suffering. So this is, he sees the situation of the living entity. And there's just a part in this purport that I think is important to read. So you can click on this. It's the last paragraph of this purport. It's a very long purport. Yeah, starting at Srimad Bhagavatam. Would someone like to read it?
Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum remedy for suffering humanity in the clutches of Maya. Srila Vyasadeva therefore first of all diagnosed the actual disease of the conditioned souls, their being illusioned by the external energy. He also saw the perfect supreme being, from whom the illusory energy is far removed, though he saw both the diseased conditioned souls and also the cause of the disease. And the remedial measures are suggested in the next verse. Both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living beings are undoubtedly qualitatively one, but the Lord is the controller of the illusory energy, whereas the living entity is controlled by the illusory energy. Thus, the Lord and the living beings are simultaneously one and different. Another point is distinct herein. That eternal relation between the Lord and the living being is transcendental. Otherwise, the Lord would not have taken the trouble to reclaim the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. In the same way, the living entity is also required to revive his natural love and affection for the Lord, and that is the highest perfection of the living entity. Srimad Bhagavatam treats the conditioned soul with an aim to that goal of life.
So Vyasadeva, before he can cure the disease, before he can compile Srimad Bhagavatam for all the fallen conditioned souls, he has to have a diagnosis. Before you can give a disease, you have to see the patient and see what the disease is in the first place. So he had a vision, what is the disease of the living entity trapped in this material world? And then he saw is that they don't identify with who they actually are and where they actually came from. That they actually come from Krishna, and they're actually identify not as that, but as with the body. And you can see this is the root cause of suffering. So he sees Krishna, he sees the external energy as under the control of Krishna. Then he sees the living entity, even though part and parcel of Krishna, is under this control of the energy and identifying as differently. And so he could clearly see what the problem is. And Srila Prabhupada expertly writes here that this is why the Bhagavatam is the remedial measure, is the medicine for the living entity who's trapped in this material world and is full of suffering. And the reason is that if conditioned souls, their actual aim of the goal of life is to revive their natural love and affection for Krishna. Prabhupada uses those words, love and affection for Krishna, which is naturally there. And Krishna is wanting the living entity to, out of their own free will, revive that natural love and affection for him. Then the Bhagavatam is aimed towards that to help revive that. And so now we see that Vyasadeva sees the whole picture. He sees Krishna in his completeness. He sees the different energies. And now he sees the jiva and how they're trapped. So he finally gets a perfect picture of what's going on and how that he can help solve the issue. So text 6 will do the verse and everything per usual. Anarthopashamam shakshad. Anarthopashamam shakshad. Bhakti yogam adokshaje. Bhakti yogam adokshaje. Lokasya janato vidvamsh. Lokasya janato vidvamsh. Chakre satvata samhitam. Chakre satvata samhitam. Anarthapashamam shaksad. Bhakti yogam adokshaje. Lokasya janato vidvamsh. Chakre satvata samhitam. Please chant.
Anarthopashamam sakshat.
Anarthapashamam sakshat.
Bhakti yogam adokshaje.
Bhakti yogam adokshaje.
Lokasya janatu vidvam. Chakre satvata samhita.
Anarthapashamam sakshat. Bhakti yogam adokshaje. Lokasya janato vidvam. Chakre satvata samhitam. Anarthapashamam sakshat. Bhakti yogam adokshaje. Lokasya janato vidvam. Chakre satvata samhitam. Word for word. Anartha. All together? Sorry. Inventory superfluous. Vipashanam, motivation. Sakshat, directly. Bhakti yogam, the linking process of devotional service. Transcendence. Lokasya, the general lives of men. Those who are unaware of. Vidvan, supremely learned. Chakre, compiled. Satvata, in relation with the supreme truth. Samhitam, Vedic literature. Translation. The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the supreme truth. Purport. Srila Vyasadeva saw the all-perfect personality of Godhead. This statement suggests that the complete unit of the personality of Godhead includes his parts and parcels also. He saw, therefore, his different energies, namely the internal energy, the marginal energy, and the external energy. He also saw his different plenary portions and parts of the plenary portions, namely his different incarnations also. And he specifically observed the unwanted miseries of the conditioned souls, who are bewildered by the external energy. And at last, he saw the remedial measure for the conditioned souls, namely the process of devotional service. It is a great transcendental science and begins with the process of hearing and chanting the name, fame, glory, etc. of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Revival of the dormant affection or love of Godhead does not depend on the mechanical system of hearing and chanting, but it solely and wholly depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. When the Lord is fully satisfied with the sincere efforts of the devotee, he may endow him with his loving transcendental service. But even with the prescribed forms of hearing and chanting, there is at once mitigation of the superfluous and unwanted miseries of material existence. Such mitigation of material affection does not wait for development of transcendental knowledge. Rather, knowledge is dependent on devotional service for the ultimate realization of the supreme truth. The first line, can you scroll up to the first line of this purport? Srila Vyasadeva saw the all-perfect personality of Godhead. This statement suggests that the complete unit of the personality of Godhead includes his parts and parcels also. And so, what is the complete unit of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? The complete unit includes his internal potency, which means it includes, speaking of Krishna here, he saw Krishna in his complete unit, which is Sri Vrindavan Dham, with his associates, the Brajvasis. Internal potency also means Srimati Radharani. He had the full picture, the full vision. And this is why the Bhagavatam specifically is also a glorification of Krishna. And it leads up to being a glorification of Krishna in Vrindavan. And so he saw Krishna as the original Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original position, enjoying his pastimes. And he saw the Leelas. Leelas are also part of the whole complete picture of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so he saw this beautiful vision, and then he saw the energies and how the jiva was affected, and then he came to the conclusion of how can I bring the living entity who doesn't know what he's missing out on. He doesn't know what he's missing. Vyasa could see the whole picture. This is so beautiful. This is it, what I'm seeing right now. This is where we're all meant to strive to go back towards. But these poor living entities have no idea. They don't know what they're missing out on. So what my job is to give them what they're missing out on, to show them this is the path through devotional service, and this is the goal. This is Krishna in Vrindavan. And he is captivated by love. He's captivated by the love of his devotees. And that's natural for the living entity. But it's so sad. He had so much compassion. Vyasadeva was, this whole desire, this whole vision wasn't Vyasadeva saying, yes, I want to see Krishna. Therefore, I'm going to meditation and I'm meditating upon Krishna so I can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And once I do, I'm satisfied. That wasn't his goal. His goal wasn't just to see Krishna. Of course, every devotee wants to darshan of the Lord. But his goal was devotional service. He meditated on Krishna in Bhakti Yoga for the purpose of actually serving a spiritual master. Narad Muni, the instruction that you feel despondent, you haven't really spoken about what you really want to speak about because it didn't include the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So therefore, try again, and this is how you do it. And the whole mass of people, they're suffering. In this verse, in the translation, that the mass of people do not know this, and therefore Vyasadeva compiled the Vedic literature. He saw us, actually, and we can feel so far removed. Vyasadeva so many thousand years ago, don't know what he looks like, beard, who is he? But Vyasadeva saw us sitting here in Gainesville. He saw our children, our parents. He saw the whole picture. And he said, I can see that they're so close yet so far away. So therefore, I'm doing this to serve them. And therefore, I'm doing it to serve Krishna, to please and glorify Krishna. Krishna is pleased if his devotees come to him with love and affection. So this was Vyasadeva's mood. And what I wanted to point out here is sort of this lesson that what struck me the most in this whole section was the approach and intention of Vyasadeva, and the result when you have a pure approach and intention. His approach and intention was purely to serve the living entities to come back to Krishna. That was it. And in one sense, this is our Guru Parampara flows down through Narad Muni Vyasadeva and to Srila Prabhupada and to us, and this exactly is there. But it wasn't necessarily the darshan of Krishna, even though he had it, but it was the devotional service that the devotee is always hankering for. And even if they do have the darshan of Krishna, they don't stop there. But through the darshan, they ask, how can I render service unto you, my Lord? How can I keep rendering service unto you? And through this, the devotees become glorified because it's the most glorious thing. And I wanted to share a story that was so compelling in this regard. Last year in Govardhan, maybe some of you were there or are familiar with, there's a Krishna Katha retreat that happens on the side of Govardhan. I think I saw some people here who were there last year, and it's been happening for years. And exalted Vaishnavas who are very learned in Srimad Bhagavatam and who have been practicing for many years, they speak on different subjects every year. And it's really sweet. We sit under a tree in Giriraj, just next to Giriraj Govardhan, and we hear Krishna Katha. And so last year, one of the topics was on Rupa Goswami. And there was this same subject matter came up. We went to Rupa Goswami, desire the darshan of Krishna, but not for the sake of just seeing Krishna, for the sake of he desired service for Krishna. So I wanted to share the story of the Ramayana and of Jatayu. When Ram, Sita, Lakshman were in exile and they were in the forest, there's the famous passage how Ravana captured Mother Sita. And in capturing Mother Sita and flying back to Lanka, Ram was chasing the deer who ended up being, just a distraction. Lakshman was not there. And so there was a faithful servant of Lord Ram named Jatayu, who was a bird. And so Jatayu had seen this incident happening. And he saw how Ravana had kidnapped Sita, and Sita was just crying and wailing for help. And so this airplane of Ravana was in the air flying back to Lanka, and Jatayu, who could fly, just went straight for it in attack mode. And he had this fierce battle with Ravana, though Ravana was much more powerful than Jatayu was. Jatayu was old. And so with fighting, eventually he was unsuccessful, and Ravana had cut off both his wings. It's a sad sight to think about. So he fell and he almost died, but he was a warrior, he was a Kshatriya. So he held in his life air for as long as possible in the chance that he might see Ram. And sometime shortly after, he was laying there just holding in his life, Lord Ram came. He was searching for Sita. He had come back to the site and see that Sita had left, and he had heard her cry. And he came to Jatayu, who was really wounded on the floor. He said, Jatayu, Jatayu, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And Jatayu had opened his eyes, and there he finally had the desired darshan of Lord Ram right before he was leaving his body that he wanted so badly. And so he saw Lord Ram and with this energy, and had a little bit of a smile, and he said, yes, my Lord, I can hear you. And Lord Ram, with so much compassion in his eyes, seeing his devotee here lying without wings, he said, Jatayu, why didn't you find me when you saw Ravana? Why didn't you find me and just lead me in that direction? I could have taken hold of the demon. I would have certainly defeated him. I could have done it. Why didn't you just find me? Why did you, who are not so strong anymore, who are elderly, you have no weapons except for your claws, why did you take the demon on yourself? You must have known what would have been the consequence. You must have known that you wouldn't have been able to defeat him. Jatayu said, my dear Lord, you have come, so I want to answer this question. If I would have gone searching for you, if I would have went looking for you, the world would have understood that one should just find God and then let him do everything. If I just went to search for you, then the whole lesson that everyone would have heard the Ramayana, they would have realized, yes, my goal is just to find God. And then he does all the work. But I didn't choose this route. I chose another route. I was thinking, if I serve you and I serve your purpose, then the world will know serving you is even higher than searching for you. Isn't that beautiful? If I serve you in your purpose, then the world will know but serving you is even higher than searching for you. And this is, I feel, the same point with Srila Vyasadeva, that he didn't just go into a meditation, in a vision, and see Krishna in his complete manifestation just so he could see Krishna. That wasn't his goal. He did so because he wanted to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And serve not just Krishna, but serve through Narad Muni. Serve this instruction that I'm going to help save the fallen conditioned souls. And this is the same mood that Lord Chaitanya Prabhu brought. The same mood that's present here at Krishna House, that how can we serve the living entities to come to Krishna? And even though he saw the Supreme Lord, the service attitude was still front and foremost. And that's a devotee, because devotee is connecting with Krishna through bhakti yoga. And there's this very interesting, funny story Srila Prabhupada would, I think he stated in Juhu, and Giriraj Maharaj writes this in his book. And Prabhupada was saying there was once a lady carrying sticks on her head. You've seen ladies carry sticks on their head in India? It's just like incredible. They're 12, 15 feet long, this huge bundle. And so she's walking down, and the sticks fall on the ground, and she's crying out for help. And she's, "Oh God, God, help me, help me." And so God comes. And, "What do you want?" "Help me put the sticks back on my head." And so be it. The sticks go back on her head. And he recalls that people were laughing, and Prabhupada said, "No, but this is all of us." And Srila Prabhupada stated that we're also calling out for help. And God may come, we're calling out to God. But what are we asking for? For a benediction, to help us with this, to help us with that. But what does he ask for? The devotee asks for devotional service. Even when they see the Lord face to face, they ask for devotional service, because this is the utmost goal for a devotee, is devotional service. And this was the realization of Srila Vyasadeva. And this is our parampara, that devotional service is the utmost goal. And this is the process of connecting with Krishna. Our whole relationship with Krishna is on the basis of devotional service. And that's the context of Bhagavatam. And that's what the Bhagavatam is all about, devotional service, and all about Krishna. The whole thing, and it's so vast. And we'll see that this pastime happens, and then immediately what we hear in Srimad Bhagavatam is a story which has so much related to devotional service and bhakti. And then Queen Kunti, and then Bhishma, and there's just so much there. And this section, these next few chapters, are so much about the love of the devotees with Krishna. And this was Vyasadeva's mood, and what I want to bring out in this class is that this is also our mood, and this is also our intention, and the intention with which we practice devotional service is so important. The intention with which we have a spiritual life is so important, and if it's so potent, and through the desire to fulfill the orders of a spiritual master and serve humanity, really, that in such a pure way, his meditation in bhakti, he was practicing smaranam. Srila Vyasadeva was able to come in direct contact with Krishna, and he was able to deliver something that was so important, that's literally saving the world, and that's Srimad Bhagavatam. And so I want to pause there for questions, and if there's a few minutes at the end, I could say a few things about Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whose appearance date is today, though I know for proper glorification of Bhaktivinoda Thakur we would need much more time. But just wanted to first see if there's anything on the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam which we heard today. Yes.
So I like what you said, that devotees, we cultivate that devotional attitude towards Krishna, and that's so big for me, like in my process with bhakti, because there's so much in this material world that we can't control, and that we that eventually like pervades our life and like influences misery, and the only way to be like excluded from that those situations of misery in this material world is just offering service, in any way.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. Yeah, I feel like our attitude in practicing devotional service is so important, especially as the years go on in Krishna consciousness, because things can get muddled. Now, we can be, in the name of practicing devotional service, we can be committing offenses, we can be thinking ill of other people, it can be tinged with so much desiring to boost our own false ego. There can be so many nuances to it. But when we come back to what's the sincere desire to serve, what's the sincerity there, then it really helps us keep very fixed in our path of devotional service. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you very much. There was a few things, a couple of moments in purport where I was like, whoa, that made some clarity.
Mm-hmm.
But the very last one, the point of material affection, such medication of material affection does not wait. What would be the difference between, because we are here in this material realm, what would be the difference between material affection and something that shouldn't get mitigated in terms of being functional, like parents to children, or caretakers to those.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to make a comment on that point, Prabhu?
Just at the point that their material affection does not refer to just normal affection. It's talking about just the overall dealings with the material energy that we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that has a material body is a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can translate that to that material affection.
Right.
We're towards criminal activity. That's what the material world means.
Right. Material affection in a more overall kind of term, yes. Encompassing term. And answer to your question, or one thought that came to my mind a bit, Prabhu, is there's different levels of material affection. There's different levels of selfishness in material activities. So, for example, I think you mentioned parenting and things of that nature, which, though may not be fully selfless, it's as close as it can get to as spiritual selflessness in terms of a mother and a child, for example. And so there's different degrees of material affection. We can speak specifically, where there's a degree that's quite selfless in that sense, or the propensity to cheat can be so high that it's very selfish. It's also material affection. It can fall into that bubble. So I think in just everyday life of a person here in the material world, we can fall under the spectrum of good and bad, to make it quite simplistic. But yeah, that's an interesting point. Raninath Prabhu, and then, yeah, please.
It's a very good question, and the discussion illustrates that there is the normal course of existence within the material world. In other words, Krishna has given a system whereby we can live within this material world and have these interactions, which would be normally seen as normal, just like we eat. Mm-hmm. We take prasada. So it's not that out of desire for sense gratification that we deny everything that's there. Mm-hmm. And Krishna states even that sex life, which is based on religious principle, he identifies himself with that. Not that he just simply says it's okay, or mm-hmm. That can won't be a hamper, but no, he identifies. Mm-hmm. So in a broader sense, there is an entire system of existence mm-hmm. that Krishna gives how to exist within the material world in such a way that is not an impediment. Mm-hmm. And he recommends that, Chaturvarnya Maya Shristam. Mm-hmm. So there is that whole system, which is the underpinnings for the spiritual development. And And it's interesting, although those underpinnings are not the goal, they're quite like Niyamagraha. They're not the goal, and you can't make them the goal. But if you neglect them, then it's also detrimental.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Prabhu, you had a question?
You scroll up a line anytime. So it says, with hearing and chanting, there is at once mitigation of material miseries, kind of, but then it's like knowledge only comes through devotional service. So does like mitigation of material suffering come before knowledge, or they go hand in hand, or is hearing and chanting the same thing as devotional service?
Hearing chanting is the primary means of devotional service, especially in the age of Kali. It's the primary means of devotional service. I'll answer the question in this way. I don't know if I'll fully answer your question. You can let me know. But hearing and chanting do go hand in hand. There's a statement by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that says, Hari Katha and Hari Kirtan, referring to hearing and chanting. There's so much linked to each other that for a devotee, by removing one and not the other, it's like it's like having the deities of Radha and Krishna and taking away one deity but not the other. It's quite a heavy statement, but he states this making the point that these two are so much connected and so important to have together that devotional service would really not be complete. Our hearing and chanting process won't be complete unless really we have both together. To your point, whether does one come before the other, the way we learned, or the way Srila Prabhupada taught us to practice devotional service was always together. So specifically, if you want to say, well, if I do this first, and then it mitigates material miseries, and then this comes after, I think in terms of practice, we should always think how can we include them together? Because if you scroll up a little bit more, it says even with a little more. Revival of a dormant affection, the love of Godhead, does not depend on the mechanical system of hearing and chanting, but it solely and wholly depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. There's also you're saying there's a lot of points in this purport that were kind of striking. I didn't really get through it too much, but this is one that struck me too, the mechanical system of hearing and chanting. Because I was like, oh, the mechanical system, what does that mean? And when we infuse our chanting with hearing, meaning that we're also alongside chanting in our daily practice of Krishna consciousness, we're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, different scriptures, then we're able to infuse our chanting with feeling, with affection. And it's saying to revive that dormant affection. It doesn't depend on the mechanical system, it depends on the causeless mercy. So when we can approach Krishna as the personality of God, as the person, with an affectionate mood, which really can't come naturally unless we get to know about who he is, his devotees, his qualities, what he likes, what he doesn't like, what is his environment like, what the people around him like. If we don't get to know this and start to develop affection for that, then our hearing and chanting will stay on the mechanical platform. And so when we have the two together, we're able to revive the dormant affection or love of Godhead by putting the two together. Yes?
I think as soon as you start chanting, so even if it's mechanical and not that knowledge, the material and miseries are still mitigated.
Yes, yeah. Also, to the extent of the purity of our chanting. So, if we're chanting in a completely pure Shuddhanam, then yes, it can be completely mitigated. If we're still on the Namabhasa stage and the shadow chanting, and we're still working towards that, then the material miseries can be mitigated to a certain extent. But it's hard to see the whole picture because we're thinking of our material miseries and our karma as what's happening right now. But there's so much more that's happened before our present life that we can't quite understand.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for class. Very nice. Yeah, I was just thinking that like we go out on Harinam and we get like college students to chant, and they're drunk and they don't know what they're saying, but they're chanting, and their sinful reactions are immediately eradicated. They still have the inclination to sin, so it comes up again. But so this is like, I wouldn't necessarily say mechanical, but I guess we could see it as like mechanical, like they're just chanting, they're not really doing it in a service mood. And so that could be like mechanical hearing and chanting, where that gets rid of the suffering a little bit. But when the hearing and chanting becomes service, that's when the knowledge comes. Like these people don't start having realizations, when we go on Harinam. I mean, they could if Krishna wants them to, but oftentimes like they just chant, go into the club and get drunk. But when we're chanting and we make it devotional service, that's when we have realizations, causeless realizations.
Also, it's important to note what does mitigation of material suffering mean actually, and what does it mean in our conception? If we think, okay, mitigation of material suffering, I'm not getting sick anymore, like my sleep's better, or my health, my mental health. But mitigation of material suffering means that we're becoming less attracted to material life. Like it was stating later in the purport. There's less material affection. There's more spiritual affection. The dormant love of Godhead is awakening a little more, and which means that the love for material life is going down a little bit. Does that mean that I'm started chanting Hare Krishna and all of a sudden I'm like having all kinds of health issues and like gut problems and this and that and relationship issues, and it's like, oh no, I started chanting and now like my suffering is going way up. This doesn't work. But we have to understand what really is suffering and what really is not suffering. I'll take your question first.
You said something a moment ago that really struck with me, that hit me, is that you said it's unnatural to grow attraction for something when you're not familiar with it, when you don't really know it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really nice, because it made me think that in order to grow your sincerity and your purity with your japa, then you have to read Bhagavatam so that you can become more familiar with the Lord.
Yeah.
It's like if you're a young boy or a girl and your parents are like, oh, young child, you will go to college and you'll get your degree and you'll work a nice job. So I don't want to do that. I'm not familiar with its benefits.
Yeah.
So there's no sincerity for me to engage in that. But then you see, I can make a lot of money. I can live where I want, do what I want, when I want it, yada yada. Then you start to see the benefit of it because you become familiar. So I think that's a good point, that if you can become more familiar with Krishna, then your japa will be even more sincere, because now you understand why you're doing it more.
Thank you. That's a really nice point and analogy. And I'll say especially in the long run, because when you start, there could be a lot of reasons that make it seem very exciting. For example, I'm starting to chant, I moved into the temple, this is cool, I like the people I'm around, there may be like a social aspect or dimension to it that's very interesting and engaging, that maybe your enthusiasm is riding on that plane. I'll tell you, if years go on, and for example, when I took initiation, I thought that chanting would become easier. It became much more difficult for me. I hear some people laughing because I'm sure it's a common experience also. I thought, okay, great, got initiation, I got the mercy, this is going to be easy. The japa the month after I took initiation was so hard for me. For some reason or another, it was so difficult. And I realized that it doesn't just become easier. When you start, there could be a lot of things that's just like, this is really great. But in the long run, you have to develop actual taste. And like you're saying, if you don't know what you're getting into, then how can the taste really develop? This can be the last question, and I'll end for breakfast.
I'd offer a different perspective in thinking about those effects. We have a store of karma, store of many births awaiting us. And so those are the things that are being burned up. I have a body now. It's probably not going to change into, wings and forearms and so forth. It probably just stay the same. But the hope is that the repetition of birth and death, that stock is being burnt up, which is the main thing. As soon as one gets a material body, there's a certain course of activities. It's, you know, the body will get old, and if that's news for anyone here, and you will get the same aches and pains that, you know, your relatives also have, and even perhaps some of the same diseases they have. They understand that sometimes these things fall in certain families, like heart disease, mental illness, etc. They fall within the family. By execution of devotional service, some of that we may even see adjust itself in this lifetime. But the big adjustment is those future lifetimes that were due to us, those are being burnt up. And that may not be our direct perception.
Yeah. Yes, I'm catching your point now. Yeah, we can't see the whole picture, certainly. Do we end at 8:30, 35? Oh, good thing you told me. Okay, yeah, sure. So I'll speak a few minutes. Is there any other questions on this subject matter so far? Yes. Microphone. Yes. Welcome. You might want to press the on button.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Thank you for such a nectarian class. I did have one question.
Yeah.
You were speaking after some years or many years. Like, I grew up in Krishna consciousness, but taking it seriously, I've only been serious for a couple of years now. And what you were describing about this, like, lull, if you will, I'm currently going through, where it's harder for me to do certain aspects of devotional life. And so can you give us some tips on how can we develop a better taste? How can we remain enthusiastic and, like, in the middle of our journey where, like, it's not that we're in our very, very initial stages, but it's not that we're at the point where we are.
Yeah, really good question. And super, I can relate to that a lot. I think what has given me renewed enthusiasm, my Guru Maharaj once told me, we're at this Holy Name retreat in New Vrindavan last year, and he said, and at first I was kind of upset by the comment, then I realized why it was important for me. But I just drove to New Vrindavan with my wife, like 15 hours, we brought all this stuff to help set up there, and I was really tired, and he finally arrived at night, and he goes, Rama Govinda, don't become a retreat junkie, that you just go from retreat to retreat, and then you get your fix, and then like a junkie does, and he's all buzzed up, and then he goes back, and then your fix dies down, and then you gotta go to another retreat, and get your next fix. In my head I was like, seriously, I just drove like 15 hours, what the heck, But I totally saw his point. It was like, you're here, but don't just come here and be an autopilot. And you came to the retreat, okay, and then you leave and you're like, what just happened? Okay, I gotta go to another one because I didn't really gain anything. And so I think it's really important, and also in life in general, to have varied Krishna conscious experiences. I grew up in Alachua. Like, Alachua can be a very sleepy town. It's a very sleepy town. There's not so much to do. There's a lot of grihastas. People can just kind of really be in their own zone with their family, and not be very active for a young person. So I would feel that often if I stayed in one place or at home too long, it just became like routine, and very mechanical, and Krishna consciousness could feel very dry. Not here. Sorry. Oh, not here. They said you can't hear. Yeah, not here. And that's actually one reason why I came and lived here for a little bit when I went to university. But I think, like what you're doing here, you moved from North Carolina, you came here, you see a difference from maybe living at home and just trying something new for yourself now, putting yourself in a situation where this is different and the people around me are different, and we think differently. What I'm doing here might challenge me, and I feel like I'm fortunate enough to have had those experiences in different countries, different places, different ashrams, especially when you're in your 20s. I mean, if you can do this more for yourself, it builds so much character, and it builds so many samskars, memories that you will hold on to for so much time, and those impressions do go deep. and later on you'll think back to them. So it's important. What you're doing now, I think, is fantastic. And while you still have a chance, continue to do things that push your boundaries a little bit. So I'll sorry?
I'm just saying that people still have services to do, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance or disappearance, I'm not sure.
Should I go till 8:45 and end it at there? Is that 5 minutes?
Govinda is the manager.
What do you think, Guru? 8:40. What time is it now?
37.
Okay. Yeah. He's such a Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is such an incredible and unique acharya, and I really encourage you to do some research about him today, listen to a class about him, read an article, and to be honest, I'm not very well versed in his whole life and so much about him, but I'll just share what I find very unique about him and very captivating. He's often known as the seventh Goswami, but he lived his life in one sense very differently than the six Goswamis. He was so multifaceted. He held a high court judge position. He was a grihasta. He had many children. So he had that aspect of his life. But at the same time, he was still just desired to sit in Radhakund and do bhajan. And you can see that through his hundreds of songs which he wrote, which some of you are probably familiar with, through Sharanagati, which we would do here every Saturday. And you can see that, for me, it's inspiring because it's more relatable in a sense to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur than other Goswamis, that, hey, I can live like a householder, I can be a householder, yet I can be so Krishna conscious, and I can be so fixed on Krishna at the same time. And he was, just a few notes I'd taken off the internet that I really wanted to share. I'm sure many of you are familiar with his schedule. Has anyone not heard of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's schedule? It's a few people. So I just want to share this because it's like, whoa. From 8 to 10 p.m., he would sleep for 2 hours. From 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., he would write. From 4 a.m. to 4:30, he would sleep for half an hour. From 4:30 a.m. to 7, he would chant japa. From 7 to 7:30, he would do correspondence. From 7:30 to 9:30, he would study Shastra. From 9:30 to 10 a.m., he would take prasadam, which is half a liter of milk, fruit, and 2 chapatis. From 10 a.m. to 1, he would do his work, his court duties. And he was so expert, he can shrink the whole day in just a few hours, his work day. Then he would refresh for an hour at home, court duties again from 2 to 5. So it's 5 p.m. and he's done all this. Then he would come home, translate Sanskrit Shastras into Bengali. He wrote 100 books, or close to 100 books. From 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., he would bathe, take prasadam, again, half a liter of milk, rice, 2 chapatis, and then he would repeat. 10 o'clock, he would sleep for 2 hours. So if you break it down, he would sleep for 3 hours, he would write for 8.5 hours, he would chant and study for a total of 4.5 hours, and he would work for 6 hours in the day. Really incredible, right? While he had a family and a lot of children. And it's just like, he's so amazing. And in last point I'll make about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was such a visionary, and I feel that what we see with the mood of Srila Vyasadeva and compiling Vedic literature to help the fallen conditioned souls was also Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but in the modern context. And he even sent a book, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Life and Precepts, to the United States, to some of the greatest thinkers of the time living in the United States, the same year that Srila Prabhupada was born. And he had 3 visions, so to say. He had 3, predictions that all came true that I wanted to read. He's literally a visionary. He literally could tell what was going to happen in this scenario, and it's really, really incredible. He made 3 predictions concerning a person and a phenomena. A personality will soon appear, wrote Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he will travel all over the world to spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. His second prediction, very soon the chanting of Harinam Sankirtan will be spread all over the world. Oh, when will that day come when people from America, England, France, Germany, Russia will take up kartals and mridanga and chant Hare Krishna in their towns? The third prediction, When will that day come when the fair-skinned foreigners will come to Sri Mayapur Dham and join the Bengali Vaishnavas to chant, Jai Sachinandana, Jai Sachinandana? When will that day be? Jai Prabhupada ki Jai. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki Jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam.